Welcome everyone to Blockchain at UBC's monthly research talk. And we're delighted to have you join us, and we're delighted to have Yunjung Park joining us for a really interesting talk, which is a bit of a different departure. We've had a lot of technical talks recently, focused on the more technical elements of blockchain platforms. In this talk, we are moving away from that and talking about the blockchains and blockchain ecosystems more from a sociological perspective, which makes, I think, a nice departure. So let me just briefly introduce Yunjung to you as a PhD candidate, very close
Yes.
to completing in strategic management at the Alberta School of Business, University of Alberta, of course. His research lies at the intersection of organizational theory, entrepreneurship, and technological innovation, with a focus on how blockchain platforms evolve governance mechanisms to address internal and external challenges. His dissertation explores how blockchain governance evolves with imaginaries, transforms their technical affordances, and responds to social and environmental demands by reconfiguring both technical and cultural governance mechanisms. He employs interpretive approaches to data science, primarily using large-scale text mining and fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis. He has presented his research at the Academy of Management and the European Group for Organizational Studies. He earned his BA and MA in sociology from Yonsei University and worked on civic tech and social innovation initiatives. So, without further ado, I turn it over to you, Yungjung, and thank you again for presenting to us today.
Yeah, thank you for the kind invitation and introductions. So let's get started.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone again. First of all, thank you for being here today. And a special thanks to Vicky for the kind invitation to speak today. And it's truly a pleasure to join the blockchain at UBC community. And I'm honored to share a part of my research with you. Uh, I'm I'm Yunjung Park. As Vicky introduced it, I am a PhD candidate at the University of Alberta, and I also come from a background in organizational studies and computational social sciences. And my research focuses on digital governance and how digital governance emerges and challenges the traditional model of authority and legitimacy and coordination. The talk I'm giving today is drawn from my dissertation project, which investigated the emergence and evolution of blockchain governance. And I know that many of you here in this room and at Blockchain UBC are experts in blockchain, from distributed architecture to protocol and entrepreneurial innovations. So building on that, I hope to share something different from where I stand here. So a different set of questions grounded in organizational theory and institutional perspective. I hope it can open up some interesting ways of seeing blockchain governance. With that, let's begin. So I want to start with two high impact moments of volatility, which the blockchain field has currently encountered. First, on the left side, so in May 2021, Elon Musk tweeted that Tesla would not accept Bitcoin payments because of environmental concerns. The result, Bitcoin's price dropped to nearly 50% overnight. But what stuck to me was the silence from within the blockchain governance of Bitcoin. Bitcoin had no governance pathway to respond to that concerns. There was no narrative coordination or no internal intermediaries to step in that issue. Second, on the right side, in June 2023, the SEC launched a major enforcement action against Binance. It wasn't just about one company. It sent kind of shockwaves across the entire blockchain field. Ethereum wasn't directly targeted, but it was named in the SEC filings. And this time, compared to Bitcoin, we saw something different in in Ethereum. The Ethereum Foundation developers and community leaders like Vitalik Buterin responded to that concern. They clarified the staking policies, framed Ethereum as a commodity, not as a stake, and engaged with regulatory narratives. These two examples illustrate the puzzle. The shock, threaten, volatility were quite similar to every or most blockchain platforms, but the responses were quite not. Why did some platforms adapt while others stood still? What kind of governance structures allow platforms to weather turbulence and maintain legitimacy? That's the question at the heart of this research, not just how blockchain works when everything goes well and fine, but how it governs under pressure. So there is a group of research on blockchain governance in information systems and organizational studies. And as we know, most studies actually focused on the formal aspect of blockchain governance, mainly focusing on incentive structure and protocols that can be worked without third authority to validate transactions in the network, and how much the incentive and protocols are decentralized uh, to allow transactions validated without a third authority like banking systems. And it's also rooted in the cypherpunk movement that try to make institutions or organizational entity or institutions against the traditional institutions that are quite centralized, like central banking systems or governance. So these are two threads in the current research on blockchain governance. One is focusing on the formal aspect. The one is focusing on the more social movement motivation in blockchain governance, but they are quite different threads in information system and organizational studies. But to reflect all to reflect the literature on governance, blockchain governance, there are they are focusing on uh, structural aspects of a blockchain governance through data layer and to on-chain and off-chain layer to uh, to achieve some directions or control or coordination of stakeholders in a blockchain project. But nowadays, it's quite clear that there are three challenges in current research thread. I'll introduce the three challenges here. Here, there are three challenges in current research. First, internal coordination challenges. So as the blockchain platform evolves and the blockchain field also evolves, the complexity and the internal blockchain platforms are getting more complex. That means the resource coordination within blockchains by internal stakeholders makes some more complexity in coordinating different interests that could not be explained with decentralized incentive systems. And it causes more complexity and more internal turbulence in blockchain governance. So how to blockchain governance control or coordinate this internal complexity? That's the first challenge in current blockchain research. And second is it's beyond the individual platform. That's the legitimacy challenge by external forces, such as regulatory pressures or needs from societal and environmental concerns, as we can see in the second slide very earlier in this presentation. Legitimacy it can be threatened when blockchain governance fail to align with regulatory norms or ethical expectations or sustainable standards. So, but how do blockchain governance address these legitimacy challenges from external pressures? So, existing literature on blockchain governance might not fully address this problem because they are focusing on it's related to the third point of the challenges. That is, existing literature might ignore the field dynamics beyond an individual platforms. Most studies on blockchain governance are focusing on a design element of an individual blockchain platform. That means they are trying to find and articulate the best governance model, which might ignore more, as Victoria mentioned earlier, the ecosystem complexity. But from the institutional perspective and organizational theory, governance in a platform or in a network cannot be understood without considering the ecosystem considerations or ecosystem concerns beyond individual platforms. That actually, I believe, and I argue, uh, these three challenges facilitated a more institutional perspective, a more institutional understanding of blockchain governance beyond an platform. So governance is a critical topic in organizational study and can be defined and understood as formal processes and structures and mechanisms through which an organization make decisions to achieve collective goals. So traditionally, governance has been theorized as being more formal, like codified rules and procedures, but informal aspects of governance is also important, and it's also relying on system of norms and mutual agreements around social actors. That means which means governance is not only about the structural or formal processes to enforce the member in a community to follow, but it's also more about it can be related to norms and standards that shape the understanding of the governance and understanding of the community through the norms or principles or mutual agreements. So it's more cultural aspect. However, so the point is governance in organizational studies are talking about both formal and informal aspect, but informal aspects usually were ignored. And another point in existing governance literature is they are actually focusing on control mechanisms or formal aspect in bureaucratic or hierarchical settings. So there are some studies acknowledges the importance of decentralized organizations or organizing by focusing on open source software movement, but still decentralized and information coordination in organizations remains quite unexplored. And I believe, and I argue, institutional perspective can be useful to address the three gaps in blockchain governance literature, as well as in governance literature in organizational studies, which focused on formal mechanisms and hierarchical organizing. So institutional theory actually covers quite a wide variation in theories from sociology to anthropology and business. But what I take from the variant of institutional view is to emphasize the formal within the informal, especially in more cultural and societal situations. So any specific such of institutional governance rules are part of wider understanding and practices that underlies those rules and likely were the source of some key principles in those rules. What does it mean in governance? The application of this institutional perspective focusing on cultural or more informal dynamics, as I termed the formal within the informal. Formal mechanisms alone don't explain governance as well as its performance. Organizations are embedded and operate in more wider systems of meaning and legitimacy. That means performance itself is not just about localized, individualized performance, but whether performance is viewed as acceptable, or that means legitimate in the wider system. And we call and theorize it as a field. I will explain more later. But this is important. This is important in recognizing the importance of the outside of individual platform in the governance, in terms of the governance. For example, even if a blockchain project is technically and economically successful, it can lose legitimacy if the stakeholders perceive its governance model as misaligned with the standards at field level. So that means organizations are embedded in more complex and more broader institutional arrangement that actually shape organizational objective and organizational behavior and organizational understanding of the governance. So that means, so from the institutional perspective, any investigation of organizations must use methods that capture both formal and informal dynamics and should be related to focus on their interplay as a key in terms of the legitimacy. So on that, I argue that to understand how organizations are embedded in more complex institutional arrangement, positioning blockchain platform in institutional field is important. In institutional theory, a field it seems like an ecosystem, but it's more. If a field is a space of interdependent actors connected through exchange and also social and political issues. So blockchain from that is so CA and Vernier provided a comprehensive map of field and blockchain governance on the left side picture. So as you can see here, there are developers, users, and miners and validators. They are quite coherently aligned within a blockchain governance. But they also mentioned another layer of decentralization tech, and which include various variety of diverse actors, including OSS and some kind of exchanges and other players here. The thing is, code consists of not only the direct stakeholders within a blockchain, but also they consist of diverse actors, including intermediaries like data oracles or staking pools or mining pools, something like that. So the first important thing is to cover the various actors within a field. And another point is that field consists of not only actors but also cultural structure or cultural issues they are encountering. Just thinking about the field, the blockchain field actually started with Bitcoin, but also it's elaborated with Ethereum, like so serious contestation on what is decentralization and how the appropriate way to materialize decentralization in practice. So this kind of two mechanisms, so exchange and issues actually consist and shape the blockchain field. And from that point, we should understand the blockchain platform is not a individual one, but it's the one interacting with the outside world, which is shaping the blockchain governance itself. So building on that, we are going back to the challenges the blockchain field encounter these days, the volatility and the regulatory pressure. Even the volatility from the external pressures, we can't build as a place blockchain governance operate, then how can we define good governance in terms of in relation to the field dynamics? I argue that from the institutional perspective, good governance is not just about performance. It's about being perceived as legitimate within the institutional field. So, uh, and in times of environmental turbulence, as we see on the national stage of the presentation, the meaning of effectiveness of governance actually shifts quite significantly. It becomes primarily focused on organizations' capacity to weather the storm, to persist despite disruption, and to regenerate and maintain its core function. The capacity is what we can term a resilience. Crucially, an institutional perspective on resilience necessitated understanding of the precursor to lack of resilience. The vulnerability that exists before a turbulent event occurred. A lack of alignment with institutional norms, weak stakeholder relationship, or inability to adapt to changing expectations can erode legitimacy and leave an organization exposed when turbulence strikes. So resilience is not given, but achieved through governance. So from the institutional perspective, we are approaching volatility and turbulence with a new understanding of blockchain platform and governance. Where the volatility and turbulence come from? There are four sources of volatility the existing literature theorizes. So internal disorganization and membership abandonment, actually it's related to the first challenge the current blockchain governance research encountered these days. So it's the complexity of internal coordination in blockchain governance. And market shift and political and regulatory shocks actually are related to legitimacy challenging the blockchain governance encountered, and that's also related to field dynamics. That means even though a blockchain governance work quite well at individual level, they are also affected by volatility and turbulence at field level. And they came from not only market volatility, but also political and regulatory shocks like SEC's legal framework. And especially during the volatility and turbulence time, the volatility can lead quite devastating effect on blockchain governance. But to respond to volatility and turbulence, you can see the difference in responding to volatility in blockchain governance. Some blockchain governance actually actively respond to the volatility and make some resilience from the volatility, but while some blockchain governance could not. So in organizational studies, resilience can be defined as an ability to persist despite disruptions and the ability to regenerate and maintain existing organizations. Its ability of organization to rebound in the field, and it can be measured by its currency values, but also from the field perspective, it's also reflecting the trust that the field level stakeholders believe in, or distrust in the legitimacy of the blockchain governance. So now I will explore which governance mechanisms work in the blockchain field, from former ones which we have already studied quite well to less former ones which we need to consider in understanding the complexity of blockchain governance. So just to wrap up so far, so what I argue so far from the institutional perspective is that current blockchain governance research have focused on the former aspect of governance, especially in incentive structures, formal coordination mechanisms, and digital access. Those mechanisms in here, but nowadays, theoretically and empirically, current blockchain research encountered the three challenges. First, the more complexity in coordinating internal dynamics in blockchain governance. Second, legitimacy challenges from the external pressures, and it should be understood. It cannot be understood without understanding of the field dynamics, field level dynamics beyond individual blockchain platform. And then I approach to blockchain governance as the kind of legitimacy in the field level dynamics, and then especially during the turbulence and volatility time, resiliency is important for blockchain governance to show their legitimacy and their ability to rebound their legitimacy and values. And so now I'm going to articulate which governance mechanisms work in blockchain governance and how they are aligned and related to field level dynamics. Those three mechanisms are what we already know in existing blockchain literature. Formal incentive structure are important in providing incentives and motivation to internal stakeholders. And formal coordination, like quite decentralized consensus protocols, is also studied as an important factor in making decentralized governance. Decision access is also important to allow internal stakeholders to engage in the blockchain governance. But these three governance mechanisms are quite different from what we understand the blockchain governance so far. But it's significant in understanding blockchain governance, and this is what I called the formal within informal mechanisms in blockchain governance. First of all, blockchain governance is aligned with a decentralization narrative and imaginaries. And decentralization imaginaries can guide and justify governance processes. Just reminding of the Bitcoin's white paper on decentralization ideal. Bitcoin emphasizes the decentralized ideal and make narratives against the existing institutions like governance or central banking system. But after that, there are several somewhat different decentralization on in blockchain governance. Actually, Ethereum tried to make balance between decentralization ideal and other values such as scalability or security. And if you see the Binance Coins white paper, you might be surprised they are, even though they are trying to frame them as a decentralized blockchain governance, but they actually did not mention decentralization in their white papers. That means they're imagining my leg of a decentralization narrative, and which might shape the understanding of blockchain governance, at least within the internal stakeholders and even the external stakeholders' cognition on that blockchain platform's governance. And the two mechanisms here about internal intermediaries are somewhat interesting and quite surprising because in Bitcoin's white paper, they are explicit. The Bitcoin explicitly mentioned that they are against in the importance of intermediaries. But in practice, blockchain governance actually have used intermediaries in coordinating internal dynamics and in interacting with external environment. So many blockchains have a foundation regardless of it's for profit or non-profit. And they are trying to use this kind of internal intermediaries to coordinate resources and decision-making process within the blockchain. And and as the blockchain technology advances and they are they are getting more interacting with the external environment. They are so so several and some a group of blockchains trying to start to rely on external intermediaries such as data oracles or external validators and operating their core governance mechanisms. And on the other hand, blockchain governance can be evaluated by external intermediaries such as exchanges or blockchain specialized media that also relate you to how blockchain governance works. So these mechanisms show not only institutional changes since its beginning in 2008, but also institutional complexity where different institutional arrangement coexist and conflict. So now we are thinking now we are scheming the six mechanisms in that work in blockchain governance. And it reflects the institutional complexity in the blockchain field. What does it mean when I say institutional complexity? That means so at field level, there is in blockchain field there is no one dominant institutional understanding of what is the good governance. But there are conflicting understanding or norms or standards about what is a good governance. And it can be evaluated and can be understood with the six mechanisms I've theorized and independently explored so far. but how to address and explain the complexity of the several governance mechanisms. Maybe we can focus on the combination of the governance mechanisms, not single ones. So it's shifting the focus from studying just only one important variables or a group of variables to understand how they how the blockchain governance and how the blockchain governance mechanisms interact with each other, but to understand the configuration of the complex blockchain mechanisms. So this configurational approach is useful, can be useful when dealing with complex phenomena where multiple mechanisms influence an outcome. So, we've studied and we're talking about how how blockchain governance respond to volatility and some kind of external pressures at field levels. And that means configurational approach to with governance mechanisms can give a hint to understand the dynamics between blockchain governance and its resilience in quite complex institutional setting. So this is my main claim in understanding blockchain governance and its response to volatility time. I anticipate that formal governance mechanisms like incentives and coordination will shape both resilience and non-resilience of blockchain governance. But just as crucial are the informal elements, such as laws, principles, and shared narratives that guide behavior and legitimacy. So the research focus on the research, my research is to explore which configuration of formal and informal governance mechanisms can contribute to the resilience of the blockchain governance. So this is a research setting. So as I mentioned before, I moved from so the unit level analysis in my research is not an individual blockchain platform, but it's beyond the blockchain platform, and it's really the institutional, the blockchain field itself. Blockchain field is an emerging field, and nowadays the blockchain field encountered increased institutionalization and contestation from the external threats such as government's legal framework and market volatility. So in 2020, there were about 2,400 blockchain platforms listed on CoinMarketCap, and according to CoinMarketCap data, the top 50 blockchain actually account for quite more than 90%, and 25 actually represent the field. So it's quite concentrated field. And it's related to what samples I use for this analysis. So I took a two-stage adaptive theorizing here. So I took an inductive approach to explore governance mechanisms. So what I explained in the previous slide. And I use qualitative comparative analysis to explore configuration of governance mechanisms to respond to governance challenges from the external. And I used archival data and organizational data from the various sources. And then I've explored the mechanisms in 34 representative blockchain platforms selected from the top 50 by market capitalization in 2020. This is the structure of the fsQCA. So to capture how well a blockchain governance was resilient to external threats. For the outcome, I use the severity of loss as an outcome for the model. Severity of loss is a way to measure how badly a blockchain platform is affected by a major shock. Uh, and in this term, so from that, resilience is understood as the ability to absorb shocks based on how much the platform's price falls after a critical event. So that means the more the severity of loss drop, the less resilient it is. I've countered the six critical events between 2020 and 2024, uh, and it's between 1 to 0. And conditions, so I've considered the six governance mechanisms of what I've theorized in the previous slide. So what we already know is the formal mechanisms in terms of decentralized incentive structures, decentralized coordination, and decentralized decision access. And what we don't know were the mechanisms that is more informal than formal. That is decentralized narratives and internal and external intermediary reliance of the blockchain governance. So that means the fsQCS model is constructed as six conditions of governance mechanisms, and the impact of configuration of these governance mechanisms on resilience of a platform governance during the during the critical external threats. So this is the result of fsQCA, and it's a general format to show the configurations that lead to a positive outcome, in this case, a high resilience configurations. So the table shows three configurations were resilient when they encountered external threats. So that they were algorithmic resilience and allocate resilience and adjudicated resilience. And the black circles in this table means the presence of that condition. So in algorithmic resilience configuration, the black circle in incentives means algorithmic configuration has a decentralized incentive structure to in its blockchain governance. So and then it also has decentralized access mechanisms to allow the members in the blockchain to participate in blockchain governance, and it has also decentralized consensus protocols such as POW. And then, and the white circles in the table is the absence of the condition. That means the algorithmic resilience doesn't have intermediary reliance at all, regardless of internal or external. And the configurations can be represented as the as Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash's governance. That means Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash actually reflect the configuration of the algorithm resilience configuration here in this table. And all the three configurations here are resilient during the turbulence time. The second configuration is allocator resilience, and it's quite different shape compared to the first algorithmic resilience. So that means it has quite a strong incentive structure for developers and miners and even stakeholders. But it actually lacks of a decentralized access and decentralized coordination and even decentralized narratives in their white papers or in their roadmap. And against the Bitcoin's decentralization ideal, this configuration also strongly rely on internal coordination with uh, internal intermediaries such as non-profit or for-profit organization, even though they are not relying on external intermediaries. So this configuration is can be represented by Binance Coin and Tron. And for example, Binance Coin doesn't have any decentralization ideal in their white papers, but Binance Coin can be resilient in encountering uh, external threats, even though they don't have several decentralization aspects in their blockchain governance. They just have strong incentive structures and centralized governance system, but they are resilient. That means they are also considered as a type of legitimate one in the blockchain field level. And the last one is can be represented as with Ethereum and Cardano. As you can see here, they are matching. They meet all the conditions in decentralization aspect, uh, especially in terms of the former governance mechanisms, incentives, structures, and to coordination. But they also have quite a strong decentralization narratives in their white papers that motivates the their members in the blockchain governance, but they are also relying on quite strongly internal and external intermediaries in coordinating governance problems and challenges and to respond to external shocks like regulatory frameworks. And they are regarded as legitimate and quite successful in dealing with the market shock during the volatility turbulence time. So these three configurations are quite resilient during the volatility time and turbulence times. So as a mixture of governance mechanisms from formal to informal. And there are low resilience configurations. I'm thinking of the time, so I will just skip this one. But just to explain, there are two types of low resilience configuration. They are quite weak in responding, in managing the volatility in the market at field level challenges. And syndicated one is consists of a centralized control and without any narrative on decentralization. And the interesting configuration is a pretended chain vulnerability. As you can see here, they does talk about decentralization in their white paper, but they are actually strongly relying on internal and external intermediaries in operating their core governance. And but they lack of a decentralization access. That means they are operated with just a centralized entities control, and they lack of decentralized consensus mechanism. They are trying to pretend like a blockchain platform, but they are really not a blockchain governance, and they are not resilient not only for uh, their operation operational way, but also their legitimacy. So, so there are three types of configurations that lead to high resilience. The first two of resilience, the configurations such as algorithmic and allocate are quite simpler. They are rely on self-interest on blockchain technology, but not of the ideal, not the ideal of DAOs or not external coordination, but adjudicated configuration represented with Ethereum or Cardano. Actually, they are based on DAO principles and they are trying to meet all the formal mechanisms in decentralization, and they are trying to follow and pursue decentralization imaginaries in their blockchain governance. But they are also against the initial ideal of blockchain governance that was against the intermediaries, but they are also relying on internal and external intermediaries, and they are trying to negotiate with them in making consensus in their blockchain governance, which are quite different mechanisms compared to two resilient configurations. So it's a quite long journey. And to wrap up my research, so I'd like to emphasize what I did find and where do we go from here. I began this research project expecting that formal governance mechanisms would matter for resilience. And they do, but not alone. They only work when paired with informal elements such as narratives, or principles, roles, and shared imaginaries. Through this configuration-based approach, I also isolated mechanisms like intermediaries and decentralization narratives. But again, they are not always necessary and certainly not sufficient by themselves. It's kind of a bundle uh, that enables a platform to be resilient in turbulent times. So what comes next in my research? So first, I plan to test the robustness of these configurations. Second, I will be searching for a complementary outcomes such as trust and reputation in evaluating the outcome of blockchain governance at field level, because resilience, as we've seen, isn't just about bouncing back, but it's also about being seen as a legitimate. And looking forward, I'm interested in how these insights can inform research and policy. The blockchain field is being continuously reshaped by disruption. So from technological to political tensions, we can ask, given the situation that increases this kind of external threats and regulatory pressures, can we trust the trajectory of different governance models through those shocks? Can we observe how platforms move intentionally or unintentionally toward fragility or toward robustness? For instance, Ethereum may be equipped to adapt to the changing regulatory framework. Others might not, but we don't know yet. And more specifically, take a rule like quarterly oversight reporting. Uh, what happens when we translate that into a governance configuration? Will it integrate smoothly with a DAO-based configuration? Or Binance model do it better by directly connecting or complying with the regulatory framework? We don't know yet, so it can be an interesting area to study. So I'd like to end by saying just thank you again for listening so far. And this has been an amazing opportunity to share my work, but also to learn from the community. I do truly appreciate any insights, recommendation, or reflection you may have, and they will shape the next steps of this project. Uh, and hopefully a broader understanding of what governance means practice. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for your really fascinating insights. A lot of interesting material. Yeah, thank you. Um, so we are almost at the top of the hour. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but I think I could take a couple of questions. Um, from the participants before we have to end the session. And then I would just invite, if you have additional questions for Yunjung to reach out directly, if you are open to that, people contacting you, Yunjung, with their questions and to engage with you further, you can post your email in the chat. So yeah, opening it up to anyone with questions, please feel free to open your mic, or I'll just check the chat here. Yeah, so
Thanks, Yunjung. Just one question. I'm curious, since your measure of resilience is really a 1 week downturn in terms of like the negative, the lowest within the next week, I'm
Yes.
curious how much of the groupings that you're finding is related to just speed of reaction as opposed to something about true resilience? Because alternate definitions of resilience would be dropping substantially and then bouncing back, as opposed to just like what's your maximum drop, right? And so it could be something around, I'm curious if it's something around just how quickly they respond, because those intermediaries probably can coordinate more quickly to respond to a drop, to head off the drop as it's starting, whereas the others may take a little bit longer, but maybe they bounce back even more. And I'm curious if you have any insights from your data on the different definitions of resilience combined with speed of response.
Yes, that's a great point. And so I think the measurement for the outcome in resilience in this research might lack some institutional aspect of the resilience. So I just counters the volatility in the price after the shock. And I've moved from the time window from the 1 week to 1 month, once period, and there are not that significant difference in moving time window actually. And then so what I've explored with the configurational approach to resilience is that uh, yes, some groups of blockchain governance might rely on external intermediaries intervention on responding to these kind of external threats. But some it's especially important in the second configuration I've explored, that is some kind of central entities role, centralized entity role is important in dealing with governance matters in like a Binance coin, like that. So the centralized entity try to intervene in responding to this kind of external threats. But it's just one configuration, one resilient configuration. So just think about the first configuration, first resilient configuration that is represented with Bitcoin. Even though they are not directly responding to the external threat, they are regarded as resilient. and it's consistent with their decentralization narrative. So
Yeah,
that's
so I guess I should clarify. The question is really the way you've defined it is just like what their maximum drop is, not if they actually do the bounce back or not. It's just, do they drop at all is your actual outcome variable, if I understood the way you measured it correctly,
yes.
right? With whatever the time period is, be it 1 week, be it 1 month. But I'm just suggesting there might be an alternate measure of resilience that's more theoretically consistent with the resilience construct, which is after dropping, do they bounce back, and how quickly do they bounce back from that? That would be
Oh,
resilience in a
yes.
more classic definition, rather than just do they get hit by negative external shocks, right? Because what you're measuring
Yeah.
is, do they get hit by an external shock, or are they able
Yeah.
to stop the shock
Right.
from having an impact, as opposed to
Yes.
resilience? Do you understand? Yep.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Thanks for the suggestion. And that totally makes sense to me. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that intervention, Mark David. I think we have time for one more question. If anyone has a question they'd like to put to Yunjung now. Trin, go ahead.
Hi, Junjung. Thank you very much for very thorough research. I would like to maybe more like clarifying the coordination, especially the formal coordination that you mentioned, is more about the on-chain protocol mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does it take into account the coordination in the off-chain layer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that means, to clarify, so the coordinated mechanism is more aligned with the on-chain mechanism. That was that your question?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's a great point. So sorry, I could not clarify. So the which mechanisms can be worked in off-chain or on-chain governance. But in calibrating the condition in this research, I consider both on-chain and off-chain governance. So each kind of integrated condition to reflect the consensus, the coordination mechanisms in the blockchain governance. So if I have time to, I'll share how I could calibrate the condition, but I do not only consider just one aspect of the blockchain governance, but I try to consider the on-chain and off-chain governance and in calibrating that.
Great to know. Thank you. I might reach out. Allow me to reach out later. Need to check.
No. Sorry, I spent too much time to explain what I was focusing on, but so sorry for the lack of time to discuss more about it. But I wanted to emphasize the value of institutional perspective on in understanding blockchain governance with actually some complex to understand and address the complexity in blockchain governance. So yeah, but thanks for the question, and yeah, please let me know if you have more information about that research setting. I can share you and happy to discuss more about this with you.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be so Trin is studying blockchain governance as well, particularly information governance in the
Mm-hmm.
context of blockchain governance. So I think that I would encourage the two of you to connect
Oh,
and have a further discussion on
mm-hmm.
some complementary perspectives and approaches. So I'm afraid we are over time. And I have a meeting that I
Oh,
have
sorry.
to. No,
Sorry
no,
for that.
it's fine. I just have too many meetings. So I would love to continue this discussion. And so as your research progresses, Yungjung, maybe we can have you back and we can have further discussions about this topic. But thank you so much for presenting today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we have the recording, which we will distribute if you would like to go back and review it because there was a lot of really interesting content here today. So thank you so much, everyone. And I'll say goodbye for now. Thanks again to Yunjung. Thanks to Stephen for coordinating the Zoom link and and everything. And thanks to all of you for coming, and see you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being here. Thank you.
Bye.